Now the pleasure of inviting Flick Drummond to give us
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I thank my honourable friend for bringing this important debate to this chamber, and I bow to her expertise as a former teacher and director of studies. As she may know, I will never miss the opportunity to say that I do believe that GCSEs no longer have any place in our assessment system, and think that we should have a 14 to 18 curriculum which could include natural history as a topic, as well as other subjects which would give skills and knowledge to young people, because employers, universities, parents and young people themselves are looking for a curriculum that sets them up for future careers. And I believe that public examinations at 16, where 49.9% of young people fail English and maths, is not acceptable.
With your honourable friend give way?
Of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I thought I was being quite bold in proposing the introduction of one GCSE, and she has taken that proposal and raised me to a revolution. I'm sure teachers everywhere will admire the breadth of her ambition. But I think perhaps where she and I agree is because she has already said this would include a component or a topic around natural history. Does she agree with me then that there needs to be greater profile, greater prominence, greater coverage, and perhaps greater emphasis on the field studies our honourable friend described earlier, in order for this new revolutionary education system to really meet the needs of this generation of students?
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Absolutely, I agree with that. And I'll come on to it later because actually it's part of what else I was going to say. I do think we need to relook at our curriculum to ensure that young people are not alienated from education, and what you're saying about natural history may be part of that. I'm not against exams or rigorous other ways of assessing, but at present I don't believe the existing system is working, and I'm looking forward to the several commissions that will be reporting on this subject at the beginning of next year. That's the new assessment system, not the Natural History GCSE, I hasten to add. But now turning to the proposal by OCR for a new GCSE in natural history. The environment is a very important subject for all young people, if not the most important. And like my honourable friend, when I meet with children and young people, it's always at the forefront of their conversation and questions, letters and emails, all deeply concerned about the environment. In 2021, Global Action Plan found that 89% of young people, that's aged 7 to 18, said that caring for the natural world was quite or very important. And teachers would like to see more in the curriculum about climate change, although they do need to have some more training and information on it. So I agree with teachers and pupils that natural history should be an integral part of the national curriculum starting at Key Stage 1. But in fact, it already is there. Children from an early age study natural history, as the OCR report actually mentions, from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 4 in science. Science covers many of the subject aims and learning outcomes that OCR have put in their proposal for a natural history GCSE. For instance, in year 1, pupils are taught to use the local environment to explore and question how plants grow, looking at plant structures, using equipment to identify plants and describe them, and record how they change over time. Year 2 looks at living things and their habitats. They explore and compare the differences between things that are living, dead, and things that have never been alive. Identify that most living things live in habitats, including microhabitats to which they're suited, and describe how different habitats provide for the basic needs of different kinds of animals and plants, and how they depend on each other, including food chains. It carries on, and pupils in year 3 and 4 perform a range of scientific experiments and observations on natural history, looking at naturally occurring patterns and relationships and using data. And this continues in year 5 and 6, increasing the complexity of what they're learning, and mostly based on natural history. So by Key Stage 4 or GCSE level, science already covers nearly everything that is in this new GCSE. And I worry about that bringing in this new GCSE will dilute the rigorous science GCSE by diverting young people into another similar course, which I think is far narrower than the existing science one. And they would miss out on many elements of science, such as chemistry and physics, which contribute to young people's general knowledge and would help towards their understanding of our environment. And geography is only compulsory to Key Stage 3, although of course I would change that if I was going to have my curriculum from between 14 and 18. But the geography GCSE also covers much of what is in this natural history proposal and dovetails well with the science GCSE. Now, OCR states that it would use, and I quote, the same underlying rationale as the models in GCSE science and geography which support rich practical fieldwork but do not use overstructured practical and fieldwork to contribute marks to the grade. This avoids boring work, which could easily be gamed or leads to poor quality assessment. And I think this is a really odd comment, and I hope that it does not mean that OCR believes that it's already happening, in which case, why on earth aren't examination boards not making it more interesting in science and geography? OCR also says in the proposal that it does not comprise of a redundant overlap with other disciplines and discipline areas. But I would challenge that it does, and I think my honourable friend would agree with me on that, as she mentioned that in her speech. And that there is not enough, but I would challenge it because there's not enough time in such a broad GCSE, which contains geography, biology, geology, etc., to really incorporate the rigorous knowledge of each of these subjects. And could it be seen as an easier alternative? Now, I've read the proposal carefully, but I am concerned that people will be taking natural history as an alternative and they'll miss out on important and valuable study areas. But I do agree that we need to include much more about the environment and our natural history and our natural history in the curriculum. And environmental literacy should be developed across a range of subjects. So learning about our natural world should just not be limited to in one subject alone.
Would my honourable friend give way?
I knew you were going to say that. Yes, of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And she raised some very valid concerns that would most certainly need to be addressed, and indeed have been addressed in other places. But one of the things I would sort of seek to understand rather more is that idea of environmental literacy that she describes, which is so very important. We have obviously, through the curriculum, much emphasis on language and communication, same with mathematics and numeracy. So she describes early experiences extending all the way through the key stages. Is it not then rather odd that we come to key stage 4 and there isn't that same continuity and there isn't that opportunity then for students to demonstrate that environmental literacy in a way that would be recognised by further education institutions or indeed by employers?
Yes, you make an interesting point, but I do think when we talk about environmental literacy, it should be not just limited to science and geography, but through English. You can think of a whole lot of poetry about the nature. You're a language teacher, not an English teacher.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. French teacher. But one of the most exciting and potentially sort of dynamic elements of this new GCSE is it does go beyond that sort of purely scientific approach, where it might rest on sort of biology, as she describes, or even geography, too, and it extends to our understanding of the natural world as manifested in art, in music, in literature, because there's a very rich inheritance therein, inspired by our natural world. So it does everything she suggests.
Well, in that case, it gives me even greater concerns that the rigorousness of a science with, as I said earlier, with chemistry and physics and biology would be completely missed out, because I do fear that people would use the Natural History GCSE as an alternative to a science GCSE or geography GCSE. So I do think it would be lost, and I do think that environmental literacy should sort of permeate throughout every single subject, which I think would be exactly the same as perhaps doing one natural history GCSE, but it would be so limited just within that course, as opposed to looking at other areas as well.
One final point, if she would.
Yes, of course.
Thank my honourable friend. And of course, learning is very powerful when it is threaded, as she describes, through the curriculum. And of course, that is very much how we started out on young people, students' skills acquisition and understanding for information technology. And it was very much delivered via other subjects. But of course, we did come to a place there where we recognised that actually it has its own standing and should have its own status and it should have its own qualification, because you can go further and deeper and wider in that specific and discrete study of IT, even though IT is encountered and encouraged and supported in every other curriculum area. It still has its own place.
That is true, but the reality is that less and less people are doing IT as a GCSE, and probably because it is permeating through all the other subjects. So that illustrates another point why natural history needs to be part of the curriculum. And I think perhaps examination boards could design better examinations and curriculums rather than bringing in new GCSEs, which, as I said, I believe that young people have missed out on much knowledge that the science and geography courses cover. Of course, I would much prefer to incorporate it into a 14 to 18 curriculum, which I think would allow for a greater depth of study and developing of skills, but I'm incredibly grateful to my honourable friend for bringing this important debate forward.